Margaret Thompson was 72 when the phone call started. Every morning at 7:30, the same aggressive voice demanding payment for a credit card debt she swore she'd never heard of. They called her stupid. They called her a thief. They threatened to garnish her Social Security check and take her house. Margaret cried herself to sleep for weeks, watching her life savings disappear as she made payment after payment on a debt that wasn't even hers. I'm Judge Patricia Williams, and in my almost 32 years protecting seniors in the legal system, I've seen too many stories like Margaret's. What happened to her happens to thousands of seniors every single day across America. And I'm here to tell you something that might shock you. Most of these seniors don't legally owe a single penny of what these collectors are demanding. Today, I'm going to reveal 6 specific types of bills that seniors are being tricked into paying when they have every legal right to refuse. These aren't suggestions or gray areas. These are clear violations of federal law that I've prosecuted in my courtroom for decades. By the time we're done here, you'll know exactly which calls to hang up on, which bills to throw in the trash, and how to protect yourself and your family from these predators who specifically target older Americans. The first thing you need to understand is why seniors become targets in the first place. Debt collectors know that people over 65 are more likely to have savings, own their homes, and receive steady income from Social Security and pensions. They also know that many seniors come from a generation that believes in paying their debts, even when those debts aren't legitimate. These collectors exploit both your financial situation and your moral character. Here's what most seniors don't realize. The debt collection industry has become a multi-billion-dollar business built on buying and selling old debts for pennies on the dollar. Companies purchase massive lists of expired debts, debts that have already been paid, debts belonging to deceased people, and even completely fabricated debts. They then use high-pressure tactics to squeeze money out of anyone they can reach, knowing that most people won't fight back. But here's the critical part that changes everything. Federal law gives you powerful weapons to fight back. And in many cases, these collectors are breaking the law just by contacting you. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act doesn't just suggest guidelines for collectors. It creates strict rules that, when broken, can result in you receiving money from them instead of the other way around. Margaret's story had a happy ending because she learned what I'm about to teach you. After months of harassment, she discovered that the debt they were trying to collect was over 7 years old, legally expired under her state's statute of limitations. Not only did she stop paying, but she sued the collection company and received $12,000 in damages for the emotional distress they caused her. Before we dive into the 6 specific types of bills you can legally refuse to pay, I need you to do something important. Share this video with every senior in your life, your parents, grandparents, neighbors, and friends at church. Leave a comment below telling me your own experience with debt collectors, and hit that like button so YouTube shows this vital information to more seniors who need protection. The 6 categories I'm about to reveal have cost seniors millions of dollars in payments they didn't legally owe. And every single day you wait to learn this information, you or someone you love could become the next victim. Margaret wishes she had known what you're about to learn before she lost those first few payments, but now you have the chance to protect yourself from day one. Let me tell you about Robert Chen, a 68-year-old retired teacher who received a threatening letter demanding immediate payment for a hospital bill from 2017. The letter claimed he owed $4,000 from an emergency room visit, complete with case numbers and legal language that terrified him. Robert had excellent insurance and remembered paying his portion years ago, but the collector insisted his records were wrong. Panicked about his credit score, Robert borrowed money from his retirement fund to pay the debt. 3 months later, Robert discovered the truth through his insurance company. That bill had been fully paid by Medicare and his supplemental insurance in 2017. The collection company had purchased a list of old medical accounts that included accounts that were already resolved. Robert had been scammed out of $4,000 by criminals who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. This brings me to the first category of bills you can legally refuse to pay: time-barred debts. Every state in America has what's called a statute of limitations on debt collection. This means creditors only have a specific number of years to legally sue you for an unpaid debt. Depending on your state, this ranges from 3 to 6 years for most consumer debts like credit cards and medical bills. Here's the crucial part most seniors don't know. Once that time period expires, the debt becomes legally unenforceable. Debt collectors can still try to contact you about time-barred debts in most states, but they cannot sue you, and they cannot legally threaten to sue you. Under federal law, threatening legal action on a time-barred debt is a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, but collectors deliberately target seniors with these expired debts because they're hoping you don't know the law. They purchase these old debt portfolios for as little as 3 cents on the dollar, then use scary legal language to frighten seniors into paying debts they cannot legally be forced to pay. The letters often reference court filings, attorney fees, and wage garnishment, all tactics designed to create panic. The second category involves debts you never actually owed in the first place. Identity theft among seniors has exploded, and criminals open credit accounts, medical accounts, and utility accounts using stolen Social Security numbers. When these fraudulent accounts go unpaid, they're eventually sold to debt collectors, who then pursue the identity theft victim for payment. Even more common are simple clerical errors where your name gets attached to someone else's debt. This happens frequently in medical settings where patients have similar names, or when family members with the same last name have accounts confused by billing departments. The debt collection industry has notoriously poor record keeping, and they often pursue the wrong person entirely. The third category that seniors must understand involves deceased spouse debts. When your spouse passes away, debt collectors often try to convince the surviving spouse that they're responsible for debts that belong solely to the deceased partner. Unless you co-signed for a debt or live in a community property state, you are not responsible for your deceased spouse's individual debts. I've seen collectors tell widows that they need to pay their husband's credit card bills to honor his memory or threaten to ruin his credit score posthumously. These are emotional manipulation tactics designed to exploit grief. In most cases, these debts become the responsibility of the deceased person's estate, not the surviving spouse. Robert's story shows how these tactics work in real life. The collection company used official-looking letterhead, legal terminology, and artificial urgency to bypass his rational thinking and trigger an emotional response. They counted on his generation's belief in personal responsibility to override his logical questions about the debt's legitimacy. But you don't have to be Robert's victim. In the next section, I'm going to reveal the exact questions you must ask any debt collector who contacts you, questions that will expose fraudulent collection attempts within the first 2 minutes of conversation. When Dorothy Martinez answered her phone last spring, the caller identified himself as Officer Johnson from the legal department. He told the 74-year-old grandmother that there was an active warrant for her arrest related to an unpaid payday loan from 2019. Dorothy had never taken a payday loan in her life, but Officer Johnson had her full Social Security number, her address, and details about her bank account. Terrified of being arrested, Dorothy drove to Walmart and purchased $2,000 in gift cards as instructed. Only after her daughter visited 3 days later did Dorothy learn she had been the victim of a phantom debt scam. Criminals who create entirely fictional debts and use threatening tactics to extract payments. There was no Officer Johnson, no warrant, and no payday loan. Dorothy had been targeted because her information was part of a data breach at a medical facility 2 years earlier. This illustrates the fourth category of bills you can legally refuse: phantom debts created by scammers who aren't even connected to the alleged creditor. These criminals purchase lists of personal information from data breaches, then contact seniors claiming they owe money for services they never received or loans they never took. They often impersonate law enforcement, attorneys, or government officials to add credibility to their threats. The fifth category involves medical debts that should have been covered by insurance. Medicare and supplemental insurance often take months to process claims, and during this time, medical providers frequently send accounts to collection agencies. Many seniors pay these bills assuming their insurance claim was denied, when in fact the claim was simply delayed or contains billing errors that can be corrected. Hospital billing departments make mistakes constantly. They bill for services not provided, apply wrong insurance information, or fail to submit claims properly to Medicare. When these errors aren't caught quickly, the accounts get transferred to collection agencies who pursue payment without verifying that insurance coverage was properly applied. I've handled cases where seniors paid thousands of dollars for emergency room visits that were fully covered by Medicare, simply because the hospital's billing department had the wrong Medicare number on file. The collection agency never verified insurance coverage. They just demanded payment based on the hospital's flawed records. The sixth and most important category involves any debt where the collector refuses to provide written verification. Federal law requires debt collectors to send you a written notice within 5 days of first contact. This notice must include the amount of the debt, the name of the original creditor, and a statement that you have 30 days to dispute the debt. If a collector contacts you by phone and refuses to send written documentation, or if they pressure you to pay immediately without providing verification, you're dealing with either a scammer or a collector who's violating federal law. Legitimate collection agencies follow strict documentation requirements because they know these rules are enforced in court. Here's what Dorothy wished she had known. Legitimate debt collectors never demand payment through gift cards, wire transfers, or prepaid debit cards. They don't threaten immediate arrest, and they don't claim to be law enforcement officers. Real collectors provide business addresses, contact information, and detailed written notices about your rights under federal law. But recognizing these scams is only the first step. You also need to know exactly what to say when these calls come in, and more importantly, what never to say. One wrong word can turn a legally expired debt into a collectible debt, or confirm information that scammers use to steal your identity. In our next section, I'll give you the exact script to use when debt collectors call, including the specific questions that will expose fraudulent collection attempts and protect your legal rights. Frank Rodriguez thought he was being responsible when the debt collector called about his old credit card from 2018. The collector said Frank owed $3,000 plus interest, and Frank vaguely remembered having financial difficulties around that time after his wife's surgery. Wanting to do the right thing, Frank said, "Yes, I remember that card, and I want to work something out. Can I pay $50 a month?" That single sentence cost Frank dearly. By acknowledging the debt and offering payment, Frank legally revived a debt that had been time-barred under his state's 4-year statute of limitations. The collector immediately filed a lawsuit, and Frank ended up paying not only the original $3,000, but an additional $2,000 in interest and legal fees that had accumulated over the years. This is why knowing what to say and what never to say can be the difference between owing nothing and owing thousands of dollars. When any debt collector contacts you, your first response should always be, "I need you to send me written verification of this debt before we can discuss anything." Now then you hang up. Don't engage in conversation about the debt, don't acknowledge it as yours, and don't offer any payment arrangements. Here's what collectors are trained to listen for: any statement that acknowledges the debt as yours. Phrases like, "I remember that account," "I've been meaning to pay that," or "I had some financial problems back then," can legally restart the statute of limitations clock in many states. Even asking questions like, "How much do I owe now?" can be interpreted as acknowledgement of the debt. Instead, use this exact script: "I dispute this debt entirely. Send me written validation including proof that I owe this money and that you have the legal right to collect it. Do not contact me again until you provide this documentation in writing." If they continue talking, repeat, "I've made my request. Please comply with federal law and send written validation." Then hang up. The written validation you request must include specific information under federal law. They must provide the amount of the debt, the name of the original creditor, and a statement of your rights to dispute the debt. If they can't provide this documentation within 30 days, they must stop all collection efforts. But here's where many seniors make a critical mistake. They assume that receiving written documentation means the debt is legitimate. Collection agencies often send computer-generated letters with account numbers and dollar amounts, but these don't constitute legal proof that you owe the money. Real validation requires showing the original contract you signed, payment history, and a clear chain of ownership if the debt was sold to multiple collection agencies. Most collection agencies, especially those dealing with old or questionable debts, cannot provide this level of documentation. They're counting on you to pay based on incomplete information, rather than demanding full legal proof of the debt. When you receive written communication from collectors, examine it carefully for red flags. Legitimate collection letters include specific business addresses, detailed contact information, and clear statements about your rights under federal law. Scammer letters often use generic addresses like post office boxes, lack detailed contact information, or create artificial urgency with phrases like "final notice" when it's actually their first attempt to contact you. Never provide personal information to verify your identity when collectors call. They should already have your information if the debt is legitimate. Asking for your social security number, date of birth, or bank account information are signs of identity theft attempts masked as debt collection. Frank's situation had a positive outcome once he learned these techniques. We helped him demand proper validation for several other old debts that collectors were pursuing. In 3 cases out of 4, The collection agencies couldn't provide adequate documentation and were forced to stop their collection efforts entirely. Remember, the burden of proof is on them, not on you. They must prove you owe the money, that the amount is correct, and that they have legal authority to collect it. Your job is to make them prove their case before engaging in any discussion about payment. These scripts and validation requirements apply to all forms of debt collection, but there are additional protections specifically designed for seniors that most people don't know exist. Eleanor Washington learned about senior-specific protections the hard way. At 79, she was receiving 15 calls a day from collectors trying to collect her late son's student loan debt. The calls came at 6 in the morning, interrupted her dinner, and followed her to the grocery store on her cell phone. Collectors told her that, as his mother, she was responsible for the debt since he had died in her home. They threatened to take her house, garnish her Social Security, and ruin her credit if she didn't start making payments immediately. Eleanor had no legal responsibility for her son's student loans. Parent Plus loans require the parent to sign as a borrower, but regular student loans belong solely to the student. When Eleanor finally contacted an attorney, she discovered that the collectors had violated numerous federal laws designed specifically to protect people in her situation. Senior citizens have additional layers of protection under federal law that many debt collectors deliberately ignore. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act includes specific provisions about when and how collectors can contact you. They cannot call before 8 in the morning or after 9 at night. They cannot call you repeatedly with the intent to harass. They cannot call you at work if you tell them your employer prohibits such calls. For seniors, these time restrictions are even more critical because many collectors deliberately target calling times when older adults are most vulnerable. Early morning when they might be confused upon waking, or late evening when their judgment might be impaired by fatigue or medication. Social Security income, pension payments, and disability benefits have special protections that collectors often lie about. These forms of income generally cannot be garnished for consumer debts like credit cards or medical bills. Collectors who threaten to garnish your Social Security check for these types of debts are breaking federal law. However, there are limited exceptions. Social Security can be garnished for unpaid federal taxes, defaulted federal student loans, and court-ordered child support or alimony. But even in these cases, most of your Social Security income remains protected. They can only take a small percentage, and you must receive advance notice and have opportunities to challenge the garnishment. Veterans' benefits have even stronger protections. VA disability payments and pension benefits cannot be garnished for any consumer debts, period. Collectors who threaten to take veterans' benefits are committing federal crimes, and veterans can file complaints with both the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Department of Veterans Affairs. Many states have additional homestead exemptions that protect seniors' primary residences from debt collection. In Florida, for example, the homestead exemption prevents creditors from forcing the sale of your primary residence for most consumer debts, regardless of the home's value. Texas has similar protections, along with restrictions on wage garnishment for seniors who are head of household. Eleanor's case also revealed another critical protection, the right to stop all communication. Under federal law, if you send a written letter telling a debt collector to stop contacting you, they must comply. They can only contact you one more time to confirm they're stopping communication or to inform you of specific legal action they plan to take. This cease and desist letter must be sent by certified mail with return receipt requested. Once the collection agency receives it, most communication must stop. This doesn't make the debt disappear if it's legitimate, but it stops the harassment and gives you time to research your rights and determine if you actually owe the money. But here's what's particularly important for seniors. If collectors continue calling after receiving your cease and desist letter, they've violated federal law and you may be entitled to monetary damages. Each violation can result in up to $1,000 in statutory damages, plus actual damages for emotional distress, plus attorney fees if you decide to sue. Eleanor used these protections to stop the harassment about her son's debt. She also filed complaints with federal agencies that resulted in the collection company paying a substantial fine. Most importantly, she learned that being a senior doesn't make you powerless against debt collectors. It actually gives you additional legal weapons to fight back. Now I'm going to reveal the most powerful protection tool available to seniors, one that can not only stop collection harassment, but actually put money in your pocket when collectors break the law. Harold Peterson's phone rang 37 times in one afternoon. The same collection company called repeatedly, sometimes hanging up when he answered, sometimes playing recorded messages, sometimes connecting him to agents who used profanity and told him he was a deadbeat who would die in poverty. Harold was 81, had mild hearing problems, and became increasingly confused and distressed with each call. By evening, his blood pressure had spiked dangerously high, and his daughter had to take him to the emergency room. 6 months later, Harold received a check for $15,000 from that same collection company. They had violated so many federal laws in their harassment campaign that Harold's attorney was able to prove extensive damages for emotional distress, medical bills related to his blood pressure crisis, and statutory penalties for multiple Fair Debt Collection Practices Act violations. This illustrates the most powerful protection available to seniors, the right to sue debt collectors who violate federal law. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act doesn't just prohibit certain behaviors, it provides monetary remedies when collectors break these rules. Successful lawsuits can recover actual damages, statutory damages up to $1,000 per violation, and attorney fees. Here's what many seniors don't realize. You don't need to prove you suffered major damages to win these cases. If a collector violates the law by calling outside permitted hours, using abusive language, or threatening actions they cannot legally take, you're entitled to statutory damages, even if you can't prove specific financial harm. The key is documentation. Keep detailed records of every interaction with debt collectors. Write down the date, time, and phone number of each call. Record the name of the person you spoke with and take notes about what they said. If they make threats, use abusive language, or claim to be law enforcement when they're not, write down their exact words immediately after the call. Many smartphones can record phone calls, but check your state's laws first. Some states require both parties to consent to recording, while others only require one party's consent. If recording isn't legal in your state, take detailed written notes during or immediately after each conversation. Save all written communication from collectors. Don't throw away letters, emails, or text messages, even if you believe the debt isn't yours. These documents often contain violations of federal law that experienced attorneys can identify. Collection letters that fail to include required legal notices, that misstate your rights, or that threaten illegal actions are valuable evidence in federal court. Screenshot or save any social media contact from collectors. Under federal law, debt collectors cannot contact you through social media in ways that are visible to your friends or family. They cannot post about your debt publicly or send messages through platforms where others might see them without your permission. The violation that occurs most frequently with senior targets is the failure to provide proper written validation within 5 days of first contact. If a collector calls you but doesn't send written notice within 5 business days, or if the written notice lacks required information about your rights, they've violated federal law. Another common violation involves false threats about legal action. If collectors threaten to sue you for a time-barred debt, claim they can garnish Social Security benefits for consumer debts, or threaten actions they don't intend to take, they've broken federal law and created liability for damages. The most important thing seniors need to understand is that you have 1 year from the date of any violation to file a lawsuit. Don't wait to seek legal help if you believe collectors have violated your rights. Many consumer protection attorneys work on contingency basis, meaning they don't charge fees unless they win your case. Harold's case was particularly strong because the collection company made multiple violations in a single day. They called outside permitted hours, used abusive language, failed to identify themselves properly as debt collectors, and threatened to garnish his Social Security benefits for a credit card debt. Each violation created separate liability. But even a single violation can result in significant recovery. Courts recognize that seniors are particularly vulnerable to collection harassment and often award damages that reflect the serious impact these violations have on elderly victims. If you're experiencing debt collection harassment, don't suffer in silence. Federal law gives you powerful tools to fight back, and victory often means the collection company pays you instead of the other way around. The next section will show you exactly how to turn these legal protections into action that stops harassment immediately and protects your financial future. When Joyce Miller decided to fight back against debt collectors who were harassing her about a medical bill that Medicare had already paid, she thought she was facing an impossible battle. The collection agency had more lawyers, more resources, and seemed determined to wear her down with daily phone calls and threatening letters. But Joyce had something more powerful: federal law on her side and the knowledge of how to use it. Joyce's first step was to demand written validation of the debt. She sent a certified letter within 30 days of the first contact, requesting proof that she owed the money and that the collection agency had legal authority to collect it. The collection agency responded with a computer-generated form showing an account number and balance, but they couldn't provide the original medical records, proof of Medicare's claim processing, or evidence that they had purchased the debt legally. Under federal law, this incomplete response meant they had to stop all collection efforts until they could provide proper validation. When they continued calling anyway, they violated the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and created liability for statutory damages. Your action plan begins the moment you suspect you're dealing with questionable debt collection. First, never ignore the situation hoping it will go away. Legitimate debts don't disappear, and some scammers become more aggressive if they think they've found an easy target. But don't engage in detailed conversation about the debt either. Create a debt collection file where you keep all related documents. Include letters, email screenshots, phone call logs, and any research you do about the alleged debt. Organization is crucial if you eventually need to file complaints or take legal action. Send the validation letter within 30 days of first contact. Use certified mail with return receipt requested, and keep copies of everything. Your letter should state clearly that you dispute the debt and demand written proof that you owe the money. Don't acknowledge the debt as yours. Don't promise to pay anything, and don't provide additional personal information. While waiting for their response, research the debt independently. Contact the original creditor directly if you recognize the company name. Check your credit reports for any reference to this account. Review old medical insurance statements or credit card statements if the debt relates to those areas. If you determine the debt isn't yours, or if the collection agency can't provide adequate validation, send a second certified letter telling them to cease all communication. This stops the harassment and prevents further violations of federal law. Document every violation of your rights. Calls outside permitted hours, threats of actions they cannot take, failure to identify themselves as debt collectors, or continued contact after you've requested them to stop are all violations that create legal liability. File complaints with federal agencies even if you plan to handle the situation yourself. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau tracks patterns of abuse by collection agencies and uses complaint data to identify companies that systematically violate consumer rights. Your complaint helps protect other seniors from the same treatment. Contact your state attorney general's office. Many states have additional debt collection laws that provide stronger protections than federal law. Some states prohibit certain collection practices that are allowed under federal law, and state agencies often have more aggressive enforcement mechanisms. Consider consulting with a consumer protection attorney, especially if you've experienced clear violations or significant harassment. Many attorneys offer free consultations for debt collection cases and work on contingency fee arrangements where they only collect fees if they win your case. Joyce's persistence paid off. The collection agency eventually acknowledged they couldn't provide proper validation and agreed to stop all collection efforts. When they failed to remove incorrect information from her credit report, her attorney filed a lawsuit that resulted in a settlement covering her legal costs and damages for the stress they had caused. Your rights under federal law are real and enforceable. Collection agencies count on seniors not knowing these rights or being too intimidated to use them. But when you understand the law and take action, you have the power to stop harassment and protect your financial future. Martha Rodriguez never expected to become a debt collection expert, but that's exactly what happened when she decided to help other seniors in her community fight back against harassment. After successfully stopping 3 different collection attempts against her own family, Martha began volunteering at the senior center, teaching other older adults how to recognize scams and protect their rights. The most important lesson Martha teaches is that prevention is more powerful than reaction. Most debt collection problems can be avoided entirely if you understand how to protect yourself before the phone calls start. First, review your credit reports regularly. You're entitled to 1 free credit report annually from each of the 3 major credit bureaus through Annual Credit Report. Comedia look for accounts you don't recognize, incorrect balances on accounts you do recognize, and old debts that should have been removed due to age. Dispute any errors immediately using the credit bureau's online dispute process. Keep detailed records of all your legitimate debts and payment history. Create a simple file with your current credit cards, medical accounts, mortgage or rent payments, and utility accounts. Include account numbers, contact information, and recent statements. This documentation helps you quickly identify fraudulent collection attempts. Protect your personal information aggressively. Never give your social security number, bank account information, or other sensitive details to anyone who calls you claiming you owe money. Legitimate collectors already have the information they need if the debt is real. Requests for this information are red flags for identity theft attempts. Be extremely cautious about who has access to your personal information. Medical offices, insurance companies, and financial institutions sometimes suffer data breaches that expose your information to criminals. Consider freezing your credit reports if you're not planning to apply for new credit, which prevents criminals from opening new accounts in your name. Review all medical bills carefully and keep copies of insurance claim submissions. Medical billing errors are extremely common, and many collection attempts involve bills that should have been covered by insurance. If you receive a bill that doesn't look right, contact your insurance company before paying anything. Understand your state's statute of limitations for different types of debt. This information is usually available through your state attorney general's website. Knowing these timeframes helps you recognize when collectors are trying to revive time-barred debts illegally. Create a standard response plan for collection calls. Write out the script I provided earlier and keep it near your phone. Practice saying it until you're comfortable with the words. Having a prepared response prevents you from saying something that could hurt your legal position. Tell your trusted family members about any collection contact you receive. Adult children, grandchildren, or close friends can provide valuable perspective and help you research questionable debts. They can also serve as witnesses if collectors violate federal law during their interactions with you. Consider setting up call screening if you're receiving repeated collection calls. Many phone companies offer services that block known spam numbers or send unknown callers directly to voicemail. You can also use smartphone apps that identify likely scam calls before you answer. Martha's prevention strategy has helped dozens of seniors in her community avoid the stress and financial losses that come with debt collection harassment. But she emphasizes that the most important prevention tool is education. Understanding your rights and knowing when to seek help. Never be embarrassed about asking for help with debt collection issues. These situations can be complex, and collectors deliberately use confusing language and high-pressure tactics to prevent you from thinking clearly. Having support from family, friends, or professionals doesn't show weakness, it shows wisdom. Martha also teaches seniors to trust their instincts. If something feels wrong about a collection call or letter, it probably is wrong. Legitimate debt collection follows established legal procedures and doesn't rely on creating fear or confusion. High-pressure tactics, demands for immediate payment, and threats of arrest or imprisonment are signs of scams or illegal collection practices. The debt collection industry targets seniors because they assume older adults won't fight back. But when you understand your rights, document violations, and take appropriate action, you transform from a target into someone who can't be victimized. Knowledge is your most powerful protection against debt collection abuse. Yesterday, I received a call from Maria Santos, an 85-year-old grandmother who had been sending $200 a month to debt collectors for over a year. Maria thought she was being responsible by paying off her late husband's credit card debt, but every payment she made was legally unnecessary. As a widow in a non-community property state, Maria had no legal obligation to pay her deceased husband's individual credit card debts. When we investigated further, we discovered that Maria had been targeted by multiple collection agencies using different tactics. One claimed she owed money for a medical bill from 2019 that had actually been fully covered by Medicare. Another was trying to collect on a time-barred credit card debt that had exceeded the statute of limitations 3 years ago. A third was completely fraudulent. Criminals who had obtained her information from a data breach and created a fictional debt. Maria had lost over $2,400 to these collection schemes, but more importantly, she had spent months living in fear and anxiety about her financial security. The stress had affected her sleep, her appetite, and her relationships with family members who were trying to help her understand the situation. This is the real cost of debt collection abuse against seniors. It's not just the money that gets stolen, it's the peace of mind, the sense of security, and the confidence that seniors deserve to have in their golden years. When collectors use illegal tactics to frighten older adults into paying money they don't owe, they're stealing more than money. They're stealing dignity and well-being. But Maria's story also demonstrates the power of fighting back with knowledge and legal rights. Once she understood what had happened, we were able to stop all the collection efforts immediately. We demanded proper validation for each alleged debt, sent cease and desist letters to stop the harassment, and filed complaints with federal agencies about the violations of her rights. The fraudulent debt disappeared entirely when we demanded proof. The time-barred debt became uncollectible when we raised the statute of limitations defense. The medical debt was resolved when we contacted Medicare directly and discovered their records showed the claim had been fully processed and paid years earlier. More importantly, we turned the tables on the collectors who had violated federal law in their interactions with Maria. The collection agency that continued calling after she requested them to stop in writing violated the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. The company that threatened to garnish her Social Security for consumer debts broke federal law. The scammers who claimed to be attorneys when they weren't committed fraud. Each violation created legal liability that we used to seek compensation for Maria's losses and emotional distress. Instead of continuing to send money to collectors, Maria received settlement payments from the companies that had violated her rights. The message for every senior watching this video is simple but powerful. You are not powerless against debt collectors. Federal law provides strong protections for older adults, but only if you know about them and use them. Collectors count on seniors not understanding their rights or being too intimidated to assert them. You don't have to be a legal expert to protect yourself. The basic steps I've outlined, demanding written validation, documenting violations, sending cease and desist letters, and seeking help when needed, are tools that any senior can use effectively. The most important thing to remember is that you have the right to live free from harassment and intimidation. Legitimate debts can be resolved through proper legal channels without threats, abuse, or high-pressure tactics. Any collector who uses these methods is breaking the law and creating liability for damages. If you're currently dealing with debt collection harassment, start taking action today. Document what's happening, research your rights under state and federal law, and don't be afraid to seek help from family members, attorneys, or government agencies. Your golden years should be spent enjoying time with family, pursuing hobbies, and living comfortably. They shouldn't be consumed with fear about threatening phone calls or worry about losing your financial security to unscrupulous collection agencies. As I finish sharing these critical protections with you today, I want you to remember Margaret Thompson, whose story opened our conversation. Margaret went from being a victim who cried herself to sleep every night to someone who sued her harassing debt collector and received $12,000 in damages. The only thing that changed was her knowledge. Knowledge about her rights, knowledge about debt collection laws, and knowledge about when to fight back. Every senior I've told you about today, Robert Chen, Dorothy Martinez, Frank Rodriguez, Eleanor Washington, Harold Peterson, Joyce Miller, Martha Rodriguez, and Maria Santos, started as victims of debt collection abuse. But each of them became empowered once they understood their legal rights and learned how to use the protections that federal law provides. The 6 categories of bills you can legally refuse to pay are now part of your personal protection arsenal. Time-barred debts that have exceeded your state's statute of limitations cannot be legally enforced. Phantom debts created by scammers have no legal validity whatsoever. Deceased spouse debts belong to the estate, not to you as the survivor. Medical bills that should have been covered by insurance require verification before payment. Identity theft debts aren't your responsibility. And any debt where collectors refuse to provide proper written validation must be disputed. You now have the exact scripts to use when collectors call. You understand the documentation requirements that expose fraudulent collection attempts, and you know the specific protections that apply to Social Security income, veterans benefits, and senior homeowners. Most importantly, you understand that debt collection violations create legal liability that can result in monetary damages paid to you. But knowledge without action doesn't protect anyone. If you're currently dealing with debt collection harassment, use what you've learned today to start fighting back immediately. If you're not currently being harassed, share this information with every senior in your life, because prevention is always more powerful than reaction. The debt collection industry has built a multi-billion-dollar business by targeting seniors who don't know their rights. They use high-pressure tactics, threatening language, and deliberate confusion to extract money from people who often don't legally owe anything. But when seniors understand federal law and know how to assert their rights, the power dynamic completely reverses. I've spent almost 32 years in courtrooms protecting seniors from financial exploitation, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that these protections work when you use them. Collectors stop calling when you demand proper validation and they can't provide it. Harassment ends when you send cease and desist letters and follow up with legal action if they violate them. Fraudulent collection attempts disappear when you challenge them with knowledge and documentation. Your financial security in your golden years shouldn't depend on hoping that criminals and unethical collectors will leave you alone. It should be built on your knowledge of federal protections, your willingness to document violations, and your readiness to seek help when you need it. Remember that every time you assert your rights against an abusive debt collector, you're not just protecting yourself. You're helping to protect every other senior that collector might target in the future. Collectors who face legal consequences for violating seniors' rights become less likely to use those tactics against the next elderly person they contact. Before you click away from this video, take action right now. Share this with at least 3 seniors in your life. Leave a comment below, telling me about your own experience with debt collectors. Your story might help other viewers recognize similar scams. Hit the like button so YouTube's algorithm shows this critical information to more seniors who need protection. If this video has helped you understand your rights or given you tools to fight back against collection harassment, then my 32 years of experience protecting seniors has been worthwhile. Knowledge is power, but only when you use it to protect yourself and the people you care about. You deserve to live your golden years free from harassment, intimidation, and financial exploitation. Federal law provides the tools to make that possible, and now you know how to use them. Don't let another day pass wondering if you have to tolerate collection abuse. You don't, and you never did. The power to stop debt collection harassment is in your hands. Use it.